All right, let's talk about obesity. It's a topic that affects, millions and millions of people, but it's so often surrounded by myths and just plain bad information. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and get a clear, science-based look at what's really going on. So, right off the bat, I want to start with a really fundamental question, one that kind of challenges how a lot of us think about this. Is obesity, is it really just a weight problem? Is it just about the number you see on the scale? Well, the short answer, according to the actual medical guidance, is a clear and simple no. See, obesity isn't about how you look. It's defined as a chronic, recurring medical condition. And the key phrase there is that it's about having excess body fat that actually starts to negatively impact your health. That simple shift changes the whole conversation from one about appearance to one about well-being.
Okay, so if it's not just about weight, how do we actually understand it? This brings us to our first section. We're going to look at the tools that are used to get a diagnosis, and this is the important part, we'll see why the full picture is always way more complex than just a couple of numbers. You've probably heard of the most common tool, right? The body mass index, or BMI. It's a pretty straightforward calculation using your height and weight, and you can see the different categories here on the screen, from underweight all the way up to class 3 obesity. Now, it's a useful starting point, for sure. It's a way to get the conversation started, but it is absolutely not the final word. And here's why. The BMI doesn't tell us where the fat is stored on your body, and that turns out to be a really critical piece of the puzzle. That's where something like waist circumference comes in. For men, a measurement over 102 centimeters, and for women over 88, points to a higher risk for metabolic problems. It's another important clue in that diagnostic puzzle.
Okay, so let's move on. If the diagnosis is a bit more complicated than we thought, you can bet the causes are even more so. This is so important. It's not about a single personal failure or a simple lack of willpower. It's truly a complex equation with tons of different variables all interacting with each other. I mean, just look at this list. It is so much more than just energy balance. You've got everything from our genetic makeup, which can literally predispose us to store fat differently, to certain medications for totally separate conditions. And then you've got factors we might not even think about, like chronic stress or not getting enough sleep, which can completely throw off the hormones that regulate our hunger. Add in things like socioeconomic factors, like whether you can even get fresh, healthy food in your neighborhood. And you see it's this giant, interconnected web of causes. So why is it so important to understand this as a medical condition? Well, because like any medical condition, it carries significant health risks. Let's take a quick look at some of the effects it can have on the body. The risks are pretty substantial, and they can affect nearly every system in the body. We hear a lot about the links to things like type 2 diabetes and heart disease, but it goes way beyond that, to stuff like sleep apnea, major strain on your joints, and even a higher risk for certain types of cancer. And we absolutely cannot ignore that last point on the list, the psychosocial effects. Things like stigma and depression, they are just as real and just as damaging to a person's overall well-being. Okay, so we've defined the problem, we understand the complexities and the risks. That can feel a bit heavy. So now, let's pivot to the most empowering part of all this, the solutions. And the key here is to think holistically. It's an approach that looks at the entire person, not just what's on their plate. And here they are. Think of these as the 4 essential pillars for managing your health. It's not just about food and exercise. It's also about sleep, how you manage stress, and having a support system in place. When all 4 of these pillars are strong, the whole structure is way more stable and, sustainable for the long haul. Let's start with nutrition. And the most crucial word here is sustainability. Forget about crash diets. The real goal is to build a realistic plan, aiming for a gradual, steady loss of about half a kilogram a week. Slow and steady progress is what actually leads to long-term success. A really helpful way to think about this is that it's not just about restriction. It's about addition and reduction. Focus on adding more whole foods into your diet, more veggies, fruits, quality proteins, and at the same time, you work on reducing things like sugary sodas and ultra-processed foods. These simple swaps can make a massive difference over time. Next up, activity. The guidelines recommend anywhere from 150 to 300 minutes of moderate activity each week. Now that can sound like a lot, but let's break it down. That's really just about 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Something as simple as a brisk walk counts. Then adding in 2 days of strength training is also super important for building muscle, which naturally helps boost your metabolism. And now for the pillar that gets ignored way too often, sleep and stress. Getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep every night, it's not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. It's absolutely critical for regulating the hormones that control your appetite. If you don't sleep well, your body can literally send out signals that make you hungrier and have more cravings. It's that direct.
So we've got the framework, right? The 4 pillars. But how do you actually put all this into practice? Well, in our final section, we're going to bust some common myths and give you some practical tips you can actually start using today.
Let's tackle a huge one. I am sure you have heard this before. This idea that any food you eat after, say, 7 p.m. just automatically turns to fat. It has to be one of the most stubborn diet myths out there.
But here's the reality. Your body doesn't have some kind of internal clock that suddenly flips a switch and processes food differently. What truly matters is your total calorie intake over the entire 24-hour day, and of course, the nutritional quality of that food. The timing is way, way less important than the what and the how much.
Okay, here's another classic piece of advice you hear all the time, that carbohydrates are the enemy, that they have to be completely eliminated from their diet. This kind of thinking leads to these super restrictive, unsustainable plans that honestly just set people up to fail. But the truth is so much more balanced. Our bodies actually need carbohydrates for energy. The key is choosing quality carbs, the kind you find in whole grains, vegetables, and beans, and just paying attention to your portion sizes. They are an absolutely valuable part of a healthy, balanced diet. As we wrap up, I think it's worth remembering this one key piece of advice. Compare yourself not with others, but with who you were yesterday. In our world of social media, this is such a powerful reminder. The goal isn't to look like somebody else. It's to be a healthier, stronger version of yourself. Your journey is your own. And that really brings us to our final question for you. After everything we've covered, from the complex causes to the practical solutions, I want to leave you with this thought. Don't think about trying to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. Instead, just ask yourself, what is one small, meaningful step you could take for your health today? Maybe it's just a short walk after dinner, or adding one more vegetable to your plate, or maybe it's just going to bed 15 minutes earlier. That first small step, that's always the most powerful one. Thanks for tuning in.